Now going to question number 15, we always start with the prompt first, and in this situation, the prompt is telling us that this is a grammar question. So let's read with an eye toward grammar. Based on evidence, archaeologists have agreed that reindeer domestication began in this time. However, since uncovering fragments of a 2,000-year-old reindeer training harness in northern Siberia, blank may have begun much earlier. So looking at the answer choices, we're seeing a lot of information in here that's going to fill the blank and dramatically change our perception of the sentence. The number one thing I'm seeing just looking at the answers really quickly, though, is what I'm seeing in answer choices A and B, which is the idea of the long intro. Now, there are two ways to name people or things. The first one we call the long intro. That's the idea of combining the information about a person or a thing together with the name with no commas. So for instance, SAT instructor Alex Torres is nice. On the other hand, you can name a person or a thing with some side information with commas, and we call that a middle modifier. So for instance, the SAT instructor Alex Torres is nice. This only works if you're able to totally delete this part and have the sentence around it work great, which is not always the case. Maybe there are also some situations where both a modifier and a long intro would go, but your job is to know your stuff, and the test writer's job is to give you one and only one right answer. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But coming back over here, we do see the long intro in two of the answer choices. Researcher Robert Losey has argued that. Or B, researcher Robert Losey's argument is that. And so we're seeing the long intro being used twice, and it is a really common thing. So to be honest, my attention is leaning toward those two answer choices when I first see a question like that. But there's one more thing you should know. This question also has to do with what we refer to jokingly as the LeBron James rule. And to get into it, we have to do a little bit of grammar background. So let's do that really quick. A clause is something that has a subject and a verb. For instance, John jumped. On the other hand, a modifier is something that's missing the subject, the verb, or both. So instead of saying John jumped, which is the subject-verb combination, by the way, the subject is the one that's doing the verb. Instead of saying all that, we can say while jumping. ING words are by definition not verbs, and there's no John or he in there. So this part here, while jumping, we call that a modifier. Now, the LeBron James rule basically says that if a sentence starts with a modifier that's missing the subject, then the subject must lead the second part of the sentence. For instance, after leading Miami to 2 championships, LeBron moved back to Cleveland. That's important there because when we start the first part and we say after leading Miami to 2 championships, there's no subject or verb in that first part of the sentence because, like I said, ING words are not verbs and there's no mention of LeBron or he. So this modifier at the beginning of the sentence that's missing the subject, what it does is it creates a lot of suspense. And someone reading the sentence has no idea who we're talking about, who led Miami to 2 championships. And it creates a lot of maybe curiosity and suspense about who we're talking about. So the next part of the sentence needs to lead with that name. It's LeBron who moved back to Cleveland. So if a sentence starts with a modifier that's missing the subject needs to lead the second part of the sentence. So coming back to our RN sentence here, since uncovering fragments of a 2,000-year-old reindeer training harness in Siberia, well, who did it? Who uncovered the fragments of the reindeer training harness? And the answer to that is it was researcher Robert Losey who did it. So answer choice A is giving us a correct version of the LeBron James rule. None of the other answers are. For the people who are going to comment and say, well, why are B, C, and D wrong? None of them satisfy the LeBron James rule. B is your common decoy answer because, yes, it says researcher Robert Losey, but it's not talking about researcher Robert Losey the way it's being said in B. It's talking about researcher Robert Losey's argument. And that's the reason why B is wrong. So the answer here is A.